I wish the first words I heard in my new driveway were welcome home. But what I got was a quiet little warning in a pressed polo. You don't belong here, and the way he said it stuck to me like humidity. You know what I mean? And I told myself Pine Ridge would still be the place we finally exhaled. Flag out front, kids racing on the grass, my wife Tasha calling me in for dinner. I raised that flag, careful and proud. Same colors I folded for brothers who never came back. And before the sun set, there he was again. Clipboard tucked like a badge. Nolan Briggs, HOA, eyes sliding to the pole. 2 feet over our guidelines. And I said, as even as I could, I served under that flag 15 years. It's not coming down. And he gave me that smile people use when they expect you to fold later. We'll see. That's how the rhythm started. Little paper cuts dressed up as rules. Trash cans visible from the street basketball hoop in the driveway. A letter about evening noise that really meant my kids were laughing too loud for his taste. And I took photos, kept records. Told Tasha we'd ignore him, and he'd get bored. But inside, I knew he wouldn't. Inside, I knew I'd met a man who loved power more than neighbors. Pine Ridge is quiet, too quiet. When somebody wants you small, you can feel curtains shift when you walk by conversations that snap shut, when you wave, and then the cruisers began to idle near the corner. First, a broken taillight on a truck, new enough to smell like plastic, then rolled a stop sign, while my daughter Nia sang the alphabet from the back seat. Both times the officers taking their time, like the point was theater, not safety. And who did I see talking at the end of my lawn afterward? Nolan, with that same clipboard, and a look that said he had friends. I told myself to stay calm. Freeze with purpose. Not give anybody a reason to call me angry. Not let anybody twist my temper into a headline, and still the squeeze kept coming. Neighbors watching from blinds. My son, Eli, asking why the police never stop at anyone else's house. Tasha moving faster from car to door, like she could outrun the stare, and the night it boiled over. It was loud with cicadas and sticky with heat, and that knock hit the door like a fist that wanted through. I opened to 2 uniforms squared up on my porch. Officer Carter, with the clenched jaw, and Officer Doyle, with the too polite voice, and behind them, of course, Nolan, standing back just far enough to pretend he wasn't part of it. We've had reports of aggressive behavior toward a neighbor, Carter said, heavy on the formality, and I kept my hands open. Where they could see you don't need to talk to me without a warrant, and Doyle slid in closer. Step outside, sir. We're not asking, and Tasha called from behind me. Do you have a warrant? And nobody answered. They just moved a palm in my chest, a twist of my arm, my face bouncing off my own siding while my children screamed, and Carter said the line, Stop resisting while I wasn't resisting a thing, except the urge to break in front of my boy, and they cuffed me so tight my fingers burned and marched me past Nolan, who leaned in like gossip. Should have kept your head down. The paper at the station read like fiction. Refused lawful commands, attempted to strike an officer combative, and the sergeant told me I could file internal review if I wanted to waste time. Yeah, that happened. And at dawn, Tasha signed forms with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, while Eli wrapped himself around my leg. And Nia hid her face in my shirt, and on the drive home she whispered, They're going to do it again soft like a prayer. And I didn't say what I felt, because what I felt was true. I tried to get bigger. In small ways. Mowed the lawn in straight lines. Set the cans exactly where the ordinance says. Fixed a board that didn't need fixing. And Nolan still showed up with Carter, parked just far enough back to pretend it was routine. Looks like those cans are visible from the street, Ding Song. Like a nursery rhyme. And I said code. Says they can't block the sidewalk, they don't. And Carter rested his hand on his belt, like a period at the end of a threat. And Tasha stepped onto the porch, steady, and said, "This is harassment, and blah." Nolan tilted his head, careful. Mrs. Miles, like the warning label was on us. Not him. That night, Tasha slid a cup of tea to my hand and said the thing that changed the story, call him. And she meant Cole Hensley. My old team lead. The man who taught me, quiet is not weakness, it's patience, finding purpose. And I scrolled my phone until the numbers hummed, and he answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting since the day I moved Miles. Are you good? And I said, "Not really." And he said, "Text me your address." I'm bringing Trey, Marco, and Quinn. And I tried to say you don't have to, but he cut me off with the code we lived by. We protect our own. When his black pickup rolled in the next evening, the air in my chest changed, without the room changing at all. Cole stepped out like the ground had been waiting. Trey grinned the way he does. When he's about to make a plan, Marco's scar caught the porch light. Quinn's eyes mapped the street without moving his head, and Tasha didn't need names to say, "Thank you for coming," and I watched her shoulders drop 1 inch, like the night finally let go. They didn't show up to play soldier. They unpacked, calm. Marco walked the yard and tapped sight lines, here, 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 and by sundown, red dots blinked on our corners like fireflies. Trey dialed a lawyer in Charlotte, who likes clients with clean records, and a reporter in Raleigh with a spine. Quinn sat with Tasha and drew a map, so we'd know where eyes lived and how fear moved Cole. Took a walk and came back saying half the street saw, but nobody wants to be first, so we'll bring the light until they can see where to stand. Nolan parked half in my driveway the next morning, arms crossed. "So, this is the cavalry." And Cole didn't raise his voice, didn't close distance, just let silence do the work. "Friends of the Miles family," he said. "We're here to make sure their rights are respected." Nolan smirked. "This is an HOA, not a battlefield." And Cole nodded. "Then stop acting like a tyrant, and for one, beat the mask-slipped clipboard white-knuckled," and he left without a word because there wasn't one that fit. That night, a cruiser crawled by, and Doyle leaned out. "Cameras won't save you." And Marco held his phone steady and said, "They'll save the truth." That's all we need, and 2 days later, the reporter called after seeing the packet Marco built porch. Video cuff bruises. HOA letters that read like a bored dictator's diary. "If you'll go on record, we can run this Monday." And I looked at Cole, and he gave one small nod, the kind that puts your knees back under you. And I said, "Let's do it." The story hit like thunder without rain. A news van with a dish on top parked 3 houses down. A man on my lawn talking about little kings and big toys. The department released a statement with words like protocol and de-escalation and ongoing review. And the video showed my cheek scraping brick and my voice saying, "I'm not resisting." And people can read. Veterans, emailed, neighbors, texted. "Tasha, I'm sorry, and I didn't know what to do, and if you need me to speak, I will." And the emergency HOA meeting. Nolan called to shame me. Turned into a mirror, a man said. Kids shouldn't watch their dad get beat on a porch. Hands shaking. But voice loud, a woman said. "We moved here for safety, not to act like we don't see. and Nolan banged a gavel. Nobody gave him, and turned the color of a boiled shrimp. The veterans' legal group filed suit. Carter and Doyle went on administrative leave. Nolan stepped back to focus on personal matters, which is rich if you like. Your irony with Sugar in the street remembered how to wave without checking first who's watching. And we grilled on a Sunday. Smoke caught in the maple like lace. Eli and Nia soaked each other with water guns. Tasha laughed with Quinn about the lady who thinks she invented roses, and I told Cole I almost left, and he said, "You didn't," and I said I couldn't have stayed without you, and he shook his head. "You were strong before we got here. You don't have to be alone to be strong." And he raised his glass to peace, and we clinked plastic like it was crystal. The flag still flies. Nobody measures it anymore. Some afternoons, I sit on the steps and touch the pole and say, "Thank you" out loud. Maybe to the men I used to carry, maybe to the man I almost forgot I was. And look, I'm not going to pretend. It's all fireworks, and forgiveness investigations take time. People who love power don't hand it back. Just because you asked nice. But something shifted. A street decided to stop pretending not to see a department. Realized cameras don't blink. A little girl who closed the curtains. Had headlights, learned how to sleep with them open. Again, and me. I still mow in straight lines. Still set the cans exactly where the code says, still believe. Quiet can be loud when it needs to be. So here's where I hand it to you. If you were me on that porch, would you have stepped outside or stood your ground? If you were my neighbor, would you have opened your door or stayed behind the glass? If you wear a badge, what does keeping the peace look like when the problem is a family? Loving each other too loudly. Drop your... Take below, tell me where the line sits for you between rules and control. Safety and silence, belonging, and being allowed. And if this spoke to you, hit subscribe, share it with someone who's lived their own Pine Ridge, and tell your story. I'll be in the comments listening.